Toxic masculinity. Let's start by defining what masculinity is. And masculinity is an ideology. It's defined by the culture that you belong to, or the culture that you're in, usually the dominant culture. So basically, it's what men or boys do, don't do, and should do. That's basically what masculinity is. When does it become toxic? It becomes toxic when it becomes rigid, when it becomes restrictive, when it becomes sexist. Some of the more frequent themes that we see across cultures that have to do with toxic masculinity, a good example of it is the fact that men don't show emotion, men don't have feelings, men don't express feelings. Another one is the sort of glorification of aggression, of violence, of asserting yourself, of dominance, of control through the use of violence, right? One of the problems is that this impedes psychological development. It makes it hard for men and boys to have meaningful relationships. It's almost like there's so much that can be said and done, but because of this ideology, these males are prevented from being able to express it and live a more full, a fuller life. So something that this could lead to is feelings of isolation. It could lead to feelings of loneliness, particularly over time, right? It could lead to a disconnection with your feelings. So you're unable to actually identify what you're feeling when something happens. And ultimately, this can also contribute to you not knowing who you are, right? And a sense of confusion, a sense of what am I in relation to others, and just a loss, really a significant loss. At times, you may find yourself, whenever you're interacting with some of your friends, for example, or family members, you may find yourself wanting to say something, but hesitating to say it, and maybe knowing or automatically saying the other thing because you know that this other thing is what is expected of you, right? And in this particular circumstance, you're playing that role that's expected of you to play as a boy or as a man, right? Even though it may be in contrast to what you genuinely want to say or do or express. How is this toxic masculinity perpetuated, right? We're socialized. Boys are socialized into it through authority figures, through media, through parents, through caregivers, and through our peers, even our peers as well. So this is how it's created, and this is how it maintains continuity. So growing up, there was almost always this competition, right? And competitiveness is an aspect of toxic masculinity. Not competitiveness on its own, but whenever it's overvalued or it's excessive, right? That's whenever it becomes problematic. So there was almost always this competitiveness in terms of who's the strongest man, right? In high school, who's able to take who down, who has a larger body, who's small, but despite being small, is still physically strong and powerful, right? And they're always they're not games, but they're games metaphorically where we would test that out. We would challenge each other to try to prove to ourselves who's more of a man. So whenever you experience something like this, the way that it impacts you obviously differs, but for some people it can make them feel very insecure about their bodies. It can make them feel like no matter what they do, they're inadequate, right? Their bodies are not good enough, especially whenever they're bombarded by, these false representations of what a man should look like and how a man should behave. That's obviously been significantly facilitated by social media and just media in general, really, to be honest. And so it could always it could contribute to feelings of inadequacy. And frequently, whenever we're working with depressed clients, there is a sense of inadequacy. There is a deep belief that the client feels like he or she is not enough. So if you're someone who feels like you've been impacted by this rigid, sexist, restrictive ideology of masculinity, this interpretation of masculinity, the good news is that you don't have to stay there. You don't have to remain an adherent to this ideology. you can begin questioning when it's serving you and when it's harming you, and start being more intentional and conscious about the decisions that you make regarding the expression of yourself with others, as well as just within yourself.